My name is Eleanor Hargrove. Most people call me Ellie. And for 36 years, I was the quiet one in my family. The one who fixed things, paid the bills, and never once asked for credit. Until the day my sister's wedding invitation arrived with a price tag I couldn't ignore. It came in a thick, cream envelope, the kind that feels expensive before you even open it. Inside was the gold-embossed card announcing Lila's big day at the Harbor Grand Estate. Tucked right behind it, on its own smaller card in the same elegant font, were the words that stopped me cold. Guest attendance contribution, $12,000. Not a suggested donation. Not a joke. A flat fee for the privilege of watching my own sister walk down the aisle. On top of whatever gift I was expected to bring. I read it twice, standing at my kitchen counter with the late afternoon light cutting across the marble. Then, I picked up my phone and typed 3 words. I'm not coming. Less than 40 minutes later, my mother's text lit up the screen. No greeting, no question. Just pay or else. I stared at those 3 words until the screen went dark. Something inside me shifted that night. Not with anger, not with tears, but with a calm so complete it almost scared me. Because for the first time in my life, I understood exactly who I was in this family. And exactly what I was going to do about it. If you've ever been treated like the family wallet, the one who pays and is still handed a bill, then you already know the particular kind of silence I'm talking about. That heavy, familiar quiet where love always comes with conditions. Stay with me, because this isn't just another family drama. This is the story of how the quiet one finally stopped paying. I'm a forensic auditor. I spend my days following money that people tried to hide. I find the lies buried inside ledgers, the transfers that don't add up, the paper trails that tell truths no one wants to admit. For years, I turned that skill outward, toward clients, toward strangers, never toward my own family. I told myself it wasn't necessary. That blood was thicker than numbers. I was wrong. That same night, while my mother's threat still sat unread on my phone, I opened the folder on my laptop labeled simply, Lila Wedding. Every contract, every deposit, every confirmation email was right there. All in my name, all signed by me, because I've always been good with these things, as my mother liked to say. What they never understood was that the person who signs the contracts is also the person who can unsign them. I'll tell you about the pen. I'll tell you about the letter that waited 17 years. And I'll tell you about the night a room full of Connecticut's finest watched my mother realize that the money they'd been spending so freely had belonged to them. But first, let me take you back to the beginning. Not with shouting or dramatics, just the truth, the way it actually happened. Because if this story reaches you, if it feels like I'm speaking directly to the version of you that's been carrying everyone else for far too long, then do one small thing for me right now. Type the word quiet in the comments. Let me know I'm not alone in this. I'm Ellie Hargrove. And this is how the quiet one finally spoke. The Westbrook house in Old Greenwich was the kind of place that looked perfect from the outside. White columns, manicured lawn, the kind of home people slow down to admire when they drive by. But inside it ran on one invisible engine, me. For 17 years, I had been the family wallet. It started small and then it never stopped. When the roof needed replacing after a nor'easter, the check came from my account. When Lila wanted a new car at 22, I co-signed and paid the down payment. When my mother, Vivienne, decided the kitchen needed a 6-figure renovation because we entertain, I transferred the money before the contractor even started demolition. I told myself this was what family did, that I was the oldest, the responsible one, the successful one. I had a good job, a steady income, no husband or children to spend it on. So naturally, it fell to me. That was the story I repeated in my head every time another request came through. "You're so good with money, Ellie," my mother would say, sliding another invoice across the marble island like she was passing the salt. "Just handle it for us, sweetheart." And I did. I always did. There were nights I ate plain rice and canned tuna for dinner because I had just covered Lila's private Pilates certification program. There were months I skipped my own dental cleaning because the property taxes on the family house had spiked. I never told them. I didn't want the lecture about how ungrateful I was being after everything they sacrificed for me. My father passed when I was 24. After that, the requests grew heavier. Mom said the life insurance didn't stretch as far as they thought. Lila needed help with grad school applications. The club membership was about to lapse. Each time I opened my banking app, moved the money, and told myself this was love. This was how I earned my place. My best friend Pippa was the only person who ever called it what it was. "Ellie, they're using you," she said one evening over wine at my apartment. "You're not their daughter. You're their ATM with a conscience." I laughed it off then, but the words stayed with me. Looking back now, I can see how carefully they managed the narrative. I was the difficult one, the too serious one, the one who didn't understand how the world really worked. Lila was the sunshine, the social butterfly, the one who deserved the fairy tale. And I was the supporting character whose job was to fund it. I never asked why the love only flowed one direction. I had trained myself not to. Every time doubt crept in, I pushed it down with the same worn answer. "After everything this family has done for you, Ellie, this is the least you can do." So I kept paying, quietly, efficiently, without complaint. Until that cream envelope arrived. That night, after my mother's text, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the folder of wedding contracts glowing on the screen. For the first time, I didn't see obligations. I saw leverage. Every vendor, the venue, the caterer, the florist, the string quartet, the photographer, had contracts in my name, my signature, my card on file. They had handed me the bills because I was good with these things. They had also, without realizing it, handed me the keys to their entire production. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the dark window. For 36 years, I had been making myself smaller so they could shine brighter. Something in me finally refused to shrink anymore. If you've ever been the one who quietly kept everything afloat while being treated like an afterthought, you know how heavy that silence can get. It presses on your chest until one day you realize you're allowed to breathe. That was the night I started breathing differently. There was one object that followed me through every major financial decision in that house. A heavy fountain pen with a gold band near the cap. My mother kept it in her handbag and would bring it out at planning dinners like a ritual. She'd uncap it with that small, satisfied click, slide a list or invoice across the table, and say softly, "Sign here, Ellie dear." I signed. Dozens of times, hundreds probably. Mortgage adjustments, tuition payments, vacation deposits, and later, wedding vendors. I never thought much about the pen itself until one evening my thumb brushed the engraving as I passed it back. The initials were E.H., my initials, but the way she handled it always felt like it belonged to her, like everything else. That pen became the symbol of something I couldn't name for years. Every time it clicked, I felt myself shrink a little more. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was me signing away pieces of my life so they could keep living the one they wanted. But there was another memory attached to pens that lived in a completely different house. My grandmother, Eleanor, the woman I was named after, had given me a similar pen on my 12th birthday. Hers was simpler, heavier in the hand, and she taught me how to hold it properly. "Never sign anything that doesn't feel like yours, Ellie," she told me that day, her voice warm like the cocoa she always made. Your name is yours alone. Make sure it means something. She was the only person in my childhood who ever made me feel wanted instead of useful. Her little cottage by the water smelled of wood smoke and vanilla. She asked about my dreams, not my grades. She clapped at my science fair projects like I had invented the wheel. When I stayed with her, I wasn't a burden. I was a granddaughter. She passed when I was 19. The grief hit me harder than I expected. At her funeral, my mother stood beside me, dry-eyed, already talking about how we needed to sort through her affairs quickly. I didn't understand then why that sentence felt like a warning. Years later, sitting in my apartment with the wedding folder open, I remembered that old pen from my grandmother. I still had it, tucked away in my desk drawer. The weight of it in my palm felt different now, like a promise I had forgotten I made to myself. That night I took out both pens and laid them side by side on the table. One had been used to bind me. The other had been given to set me free. I didn't sleep much. Instead, I started digging. Quietly, methodically, the way I do when I audit a suspicious client. Bank records, old emails, trust documents I had never thought to question before. The more I looked, the more the pieces refused to line up. My mother's stories about family finances had always been vague. We're not as comfortable as we used to be. Your grandmother's estate was smaller than expected. We're all making sacrifices. But the numbers I was seeing told a different story. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own family, present, useful, but never truly seen, you know how disorienting it is when the first cracks of truth start to show. It doesn't crash in like a wave. It seeps in slowly, cold and undeniable. I closed the drawer with both pens inside and whispered to the empty room. I'm done signing for them. The next morning, the $12,000 demand was still sitting in my messages. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the beginning of the end of who I used to be. The DNA test was never supposed to change everything. It started as a half-joke during one of those tense family dinners. 6 months earlier, Lila had waved her little cardboard kit around after a few glasses of wine. You should do one too, Ellie. Maybe we'll find out you're secretly a Viking or something. You've always been the odd one out with money. Everyone laughed. My mother laughed the loudest, but her eyes didn't match her mouth. That tiny flicker, the way she changed the subject too fast, lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I ordered the kit on my phone under the table. I told myself it was just to prove Lila wrong. Just curiosity. Nothing more. When the results came back weeks later, I let the email sit unread for months. Something in me already knew I wasn't ready for what it might say. But after the $12,000 invitation and my mother's cold text, I finally opened it. The numbers hit me harder than I expected. Lila and I shared only 874 centimorgans. The algorithm didn't call her my sister. It called her my first cousin. I sat there in the blue glow of my laptop at 2:17 a.m., heart pounding, rereading the same lines over and over. Full sisters share well over 2,200 centimorgans on average. First cousins hover around 800, 2,300. The science was cold, clinical, and merciless. I did what I always do when numbers don't add up. I cross-checked. I pulled up every chart, every study, every range I've used in actual court cases. There was no comfortable overlap here. No gentle way to explain it away. The realization settled over me like frost on glass. Vivian Hargrove was not my mother. She was my aunt. And the woman I had called Grandmother Eleanor had been my real mother. Everything I thought I knew about my place in the family cracked open in that moment. I thought about the empty chair at holiday dinners that no one ever sat in. The one that had belonged to my grandmother. I thought about how Vivienne had rushed to handle her estate when she passed. I thought about the way I had always felt slightly out of place, like a guest who had overstayed her welcome in her own home. The pen. The careful way my mother guarded family documents. The way she pushed Lila forward and kept me in the background, useful but never celebrated. It all clicked with a sickening finality. I didn't cry, I just sat there breathing slowly, letting the truth rearrange every memory I had. Pippa called me the next morning. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, then said the words I needed to hear. "Ellie, this isn't just about money anymore. This is about the life they stole from you." That was the first crack. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a single undeniable fracture in the story I had been living inside for 36 years. I didn't confront them right away. I'm not the screaming type. Instead, I did what I do best. I started gathering proof, quietly, methodically, like the professional I am. Because if I was going to step out of the role of the family wallet, I needed to know exactly how deep the lie went. And I was finally ready to find out. That same night, after the DNA results had finished rewriting my entire history, I made a pot of coffee and opened every file I could access. By 4 a.m., the picture was painfully clear. My grandmother Eleanor had created an irrevocable trust the year before she died. I was the sole beneficiary, not the family, not Vivienne, not Leela, just me. The trust had been managed by my aunt, my so-called mother, for 17 years. And during that time, millions had flowed out to support the lifestyle they all pretended was normal. Every family emergency that had drained my savings had actually been covered by money that was already mine. The kitchen renovation, Lila's European graduation trip, the endless club dues, all of it. I sat back in my chair and let the weight of it settle. The anger I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, icy clarity. This wasn't rage. This was precision. I called my grandmother's old lawyer, Margaret Whitmore, at 9 a.m. sharp. When I said my name, there was a long pause on the other end. "Eleanor, I've been waiting for this call for a very long time." She explained everything. The trust. The letter my real mother had left specifically for me. The legal loopholes Vivienne had used to keep me in the dark. None of it was technically illegal enough to send her to prison, but it was more than enough to destroy the illusion they had built their lives around. Margaret asked if I wanted to move immediately. I told her no, not yet. "I need to do this my way," I said quietly. The way they never expected. The next few days blurred together. I canceled nothing yet. I simply prepared. I documented every contract. I recorded every voicemail my mother left demanding I do the right thing. I transferred just enough of my personal money to look normal, while I mapped out the quiet collapse of their wedding production. Lila called me 3 times. Her voice was bright and sharp, the way it got when she wanted something. "Ellie, this is ridiculous. Everyone contributes. It's not a big deal for you." I didn't argue. I just listened and saved the recordings. On the 4th night, at 1:12 a.m., Lila sent the text I knew was coming. "You owe me." I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then I turned my phone face down and went to sleep. The first peaceful sleep I'd had in weeks. Because I finally understood the difference between being useful and being wanted. And I was no longer willing to trade my life for their approval. The woman who had spent 36 years shrinking herself was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly what she was worth, and exactly what she was no longer willing to pay. This was the night everything changed. Not with shouting. Not with tears. But with the quiet, unstoppable decision to stop signing my name to their story. The $12,000 demand wasn't the beginning of the end. It was simply the moment they stopped pretending. Lila's wedding planning had been escalating for months. Every week there was another emergency expense. The flowers needed upgrading. The menu required a celebrity chef. The venue wanted an extra deposit because important people were coming. And every single time, the message found its way to me. But printing it on the invitation crossed a line even I couldn't ignore. I drove to my mother's house the next afternoon, not to argue, but to observe. She was in the sunroom, reviewing seating charts with Lila. When I walked in, they both looked up with matching expressions of practiced disappointment. "Ellie, we really need you to step up," my mother said, voice smooth as always. "This is your sister's special day. Family supports family." I looked at Lila. $12,000 to sit in a chair at your wedding. That's what family support looks like to you? Lila rolled her eyes. God, you always make everything so dramatic. It's not even that much money for you. You don't have kids. You don't have anyone to spend it on anyway. The words landed exactly where they were meant to. Right in the old wound. But this time, instead of bleeding, something in me went very still. My mother stepped in, the way she always did. "We raised you better than this. After everything we've done." I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked one question. "Whose money have you actually been spending all these years, Mom?" The silence that followed was loud. My mother's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her teacup. Lila looked confused, then annoyed. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and left. There was nothing left to discuss. That evening, the texts started coming in waves. Guilt, anger, threats wrapped in concern. I saved every single one. Meanwhile, I began the cancellations. Not all at once. One vendor at a time. Calm, professional emails and phone calls. "Hi, this is Eleanor Hargrove. I'm calling to cancel the contract under my name for the Hargrove Landon wedding." "Yes. I understand the deposit is non-refundable. Please proceed." Each call felt like removing one brick from a wall I had helped build. With every cancellation, I felt lighter. The venue manager sounded genuinely surprised. The florist actually thanked me for being straightforward. The photographer, a kind older woman named Rosa, paused and said, "Honey, I've done hundreds of weddings. Nobody puts a price tag on family. You keep your money." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. By the end of the week, half the major vendors had been quietly released. The wedding machine was starting to shake, but my mother and Lila still believed I would cave. They always had. They didn't understand yet that I wasn't trying to ruin the wedding. I was simply refusing to fund it anymore. And the difference between those two things would become very clear very soon. While the wedding plans continued on the surface, I worked in silence. Every morning before work and every evening after, I built my case the way I build cases for clients. Meticulously, without emotion, with nothing but facts. I requested full trust statements from Margaret Whitmore. I cross-referenced every distribution over the last 17 years. I pulled property records, bank transfers, and tax filings. The pattern was devastatingly clear. Money from my grandmother's trust had paid for almost everything in the Hargrove house since I was 19. Lila's graduate degree. My mother's luxury car leases. Even the down payment on the vacation condo they surprised themselves with 2 years ago. All of it had been drawn from the fund that was legally mine alone. I created spreadsheets with cold precision. Columns for dates, amounts, descriptions. Every time I had sacrificed. Skipped vacations, eaten cheaply, delayed my own home renovation. There was a matching withdrawal that had gone to them instead. The numbers didn't lie. They never do. Pippa came over one night with takeout and refused to leave until I ate something. She looked at the spreadsheets and whistled low. Jesus, Ellie, They didn't just use you, they built an entire lifestyle on your back while calling you ungrateful. I nodded slowly. The worst part is I let them. No, she said firmly. The worst part is they made you believe you owed them for existing. That night, I made the decision to file for a formal accounting and trustee removal. But not before the wedding. I wanted them to feel the ground disappear beneath their feet, exactly when they thought they were at their highest. I also found the letter. Margaret had kept it exactly as my grandmother requested, sealed, with my name written in her elegant handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I held it in my hands for a long time, feeling the weight of 17 years of silence between us. When I finally read it, the tears came quietly. My real mother had written it the year before she passed. She explained her fear, her regret, her love. She had chosen to let Vivienne raise me because she thought it would protect me from scandal. But she had made sure the money, and the truth, would find me when I was ready. She ended the letter with words I will never forget. You were always wanted, my darling girl. Not useful, wanted. Sign your name only on things that belong to you, starting with your own life. I folded the letter carefully and placed it with the pen she had given me all those years ago. The evidence was complete. The contracts, the trust records, the DNA results, the letter, the recordings of threats and demands. Now all that remained was timing, and I had become very good at waiting. The contracts were my quiet superpower. Because I had been the responsible one for so long, every major vendor for Lila's wedding had been put in my name, my signature, my contact information, my credit card on file as the guarantor. They never imagined that the person they relied on to pay would one day choose to walk away. I started making the calls on a Tuesday morning. One by one, I canceled. The Harbor Grand Estate, $28,000 deposit, gone. The celebrity caterer, $45,000 contract, terminated. The luxury florist, $19,000 arrangement, canceled. The string quartet and lighting designer, all released. Each conversation was polite, professional, and final. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I was the client of record. The wedding coordinator called me in a panic by Wednesday afternoon. Miss Hargrove, we've received multiple cancellation notices. Is there a problem with the event? Yes, I said calmly. The problem is that I will no longer be funding an event where my presence has a price tag. She went quiet. Then she whispered, I understand. I'm so sorry. By Friday, the entire production was crumbling. Vendors were pulling out. Deposits were lost. The beautiful illusion my mother and sister had built was collapsing under the weight of its own dependence on me. My mother left me 7 voicemails that weekend. They started with anger, moved to guilt, and ended with something close to fear. Eleanor, this is childish. Fix it. You're humiliating your sister. If you do this, we're done. Do you hear me? I saved every single one. Lila showed up at my apartment on Sunday morning, eyes red, voice shaking with rage and confusion. What the hell is wrong with you? This is my wedding. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time saw not my sister, but a woman who had been raised to believe the world owed her everything. I'm not ruining your wedding, Lila, I said quietly. I'm simply refusing to pay for it. There's a difference. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. That night, I sat with the old fountain pen in my hands again. The one my real mother had given me. I practiced signing my name the way she taught me. Slow, deliberate, with my full weight behind it. Eleanor Hargrove. Not useful. Not obligated. Just me. The contracts had always been the source of their power over me. Now they had become the source of my freedom. And I was finally ready to use them. I opened the letter on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The paper was thick, cream-colored, with my mother's elegant handwriting flowing across the page. The ink had aged, but the words felt alive. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then you have finally asked the question they spent your whole life training you not to ask. For that, I am both sorry and grateful. You are my daughter, not my granddaughter, mine. I was young and afraid. The family made it clear that a child born outside their carefully constructed image would be a scandal. So I let Vivian raise you as her own. It was the greatest regret of my life. But I made sure you would always be taken care of. The trust is yours alone. Every penny. I made certain of it with lawyers who promised to protect you when I no longer could. The pen I gave you on your 12th birthday, keep it. Use it only for things that are truly yours. Your name is powerful, my girl. Never let them make you sign it away again. You were always wanted, always loved. Find your freedom, Ellie. Mom, I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it inside the folder with the DNA results and trust documents. The truth was no longer a suspicion. It was paper. It was science. It was undeniable. I drove to Margaret Whitmore's office. The next morning, she reviewed everything and looked at me with something close to pride. You're ready to file, aren't you? Yes, I said, but not before the rehearsal dinner. She raised an eyebrow. You want them to feel it publicly. I want the truth to be witnessed, I replied. Not hidden the way they hid me. We prepared the petition for trustee removal, full accounting, and surcharge. We also prepared the emergency motion to freeze the trust. Everything was timed to land the day before the rehearsal. That evening, I stood in front of my mirror holding the old fountain pen. I signed the first document with it, my full name, slow and sure, exactly the way my real mother had taught me. For the first time in my life, the signature felt like it belonged to me completely. The letter had given me more than truth. It had given me permission to stop shrinking, to stop earning love that should have been unconditional. And now, I was ready to show them exactly what that looked like. The cancellations accelerated in the final week. I worked methodically, like auditing a complex fraud case. Each vendor call was calm and professional. I confirmed my identity as the contracting party and terminated the agreements one by one. The string quartet sent a polite confirmation. The luxury transport company expressed regret, but accepted the cancellation. The custom cake designer, who had already begun work, sounded genuinely relieved when I offered to cover the materials cost out of goodwill. With every canceled status update in my email, I felt another chain fall away. My mother and Lila were still trying to hold everything together with frantic phone calls and last-minute credit card attempts. But the contracts were ironclad in my favor. Without my signature and financial backing, the entire production was dead in the water. I received a final text from Lila the night before the rehearsal dinner. You're actually going to ruin my life over money? After everything we've been through? I didn't reply. Instead, I prepared the folder I would bring with me. Inside were the trust statements, the DNA results, the letter from my mother, and printed copies of every cancellation confirmation. On top of it all, I placed the fountain pen. That night, I slept deeply. No anxiety, no guilt. Just the quiet certainty that comes when you finally align your actions with your worth. The next morning, I chose my outfit carefully. A simple navy dress, elegant, but not trying too hard. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman who had stopped performing. As I drove toward the Harbor Grand Estate for the rehearsal dinner, I didn't feel anger. I felt ready. This wasn't about revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. This was about truth finally being allowed into the room. Their dream, built on my silence, my money, and my erasure, was already over. They just didn't know it yet. I parked the car, took a slow breath, and picked up the folder. It was time. The Harbor Grand Estate glowed under soft lighting as I walked in. White linens, crystal glasses, the scent of expensive flowers that had already been canceled. About 40 guests milled around, unaware that the wedding they were celebrating was already a ghost. My mother spotted me immediately. She approached with that practiced smile, her hand light on my arm as she guided me toward the head table. "Ellie, darling, I'm so glad you came to your senses." I said nothing. I simply took my seat at the end of the table where they had placed me. The problem seat, as always. Halfway through the first course, my mother stood up with her glass raised. The performance began. "We all know family isn't always easy," she started, voice warm and wounded. "Some of us give more, some take. But tonight, I hope my daughter will do the right thing and support her sister." She slid a piece of paper toward me, a prepared apology letter. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the gold-banded pen. The click as she uncapped it echoed in my ears. "Sign it, Eleanor. Make this right." The room watched. Instead of taking their pen, I opened my folder and began laying down page after page on the white linen. Trust statements, DNA results, cancellation confirmations, and finally, my real mother's letter. The silence that fell was absolute. I picked up my own pen, the one my real mother had given me, and held it up so the engraving caught the light. "This pen," I said calmly, "was given to me by my mother, not my aunt, my mother, Eleanor Hargrove Sr." I turned to my aunt. "You've been spending my inheritance while billing me for the privilege of family. That ends tonight." Lila's face went white. My aunt's hand gripped the edge of the table. Guests began reading the documents. Whispers spread. Chairs scraped as a few important people stood up and left. I signed the petition for trustee removal with my real mother's pen right there in front of everyone. The weight felt exactly right. The performance was over. The room emptied faster than I expected. Cordelia Langford, the woman my aunt had spent years trying to impress, stood up first. She folded her napkin with deliberate care, looked at my aunt, and said simply, "We've heard enough, Vivienne." 2 other couples followed, then more. The sound of chairs scraping against the marble floor became a quiet exodus. No one shouted. No one made a scene. They simply left, taking their judgment with them. My aunt stood in the middle of it all, her perfect composure finally cracking. She looked smaller somehow under the chandelier light. Lila was crying, not the elegant kind, but the ugly, shocked kind of someone whose entire world had just collapsed in public. Her fiancé had already stepped away from her, his face pale and distant. I remained seated, calm, watching it all without triumph. This wasn't joy. This was closure. My aunt turned to me one last time, voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this, Eleanor." I looked at her, really looked, and felt nothing but pity. "No," I said quietly, "I won't." I picked up my mother's pen, capped it with a soft click, and placed it back in my bag. That sound, the same one that had once signaled my submission, now marked my freedom. As I walked out of the Harbor Grand Estate that night, the cool ocean air felt like the first real breath I had taken in years. The folder under my arm contained the end of one story and the beginning of another. The room that had watched me be diminished for decades had finally gone silent. And in that silence, I found my voice. The weeks that followed were quiet in the best possible way. The court granted the trustee removal and ordered a full accounting. My aunt was required to repay what she could, though the money mattered less to me now than the truth finally being official. Lila's wedding never happened. The engagement dissolved shortly after. Some bridges burned. Others I simply stopped maintaining. I created the Eleanor Hargrove Foundation with part of the trust. It helps women who have spent years being the useful ones in their families, providing scholarships, legal aid, and quiet support for those ready to stop shrinking. I still have the pen. I use it now to sign things that matter. Foundation documents, my own home renovation contracts, and letters to the young women the foundation has helped. Last week, I received a handwritten note from one of them. "Thank you for seeing me, not as useful but as wanted." I cried when I read it. Then I signed my reply with the same pen my mother gave me. My name is Eleanor Hargrove. I am no longer the family wallet. I am the woman who finally chose herself. And that choice changed everything.